How long have you been with RJ Groner, and can you talk about your role as service supervisor?
I will be here 10 years come October, actually. It's been a long time already. So, as a role of supervisor, the guys run into the field, they go to a job, and they find issues or deficiencies with a piece of equipment. They'll call me out to go over the system with them just to see, what solutions I can provide for the customer. So, I'm there as a second set of eyes, pretty much just to verify what they're finding.
When you arrive at a customer's home to assist a technician, what's your biggest priority?
I, I mean, there's a lot of priorities, but my biggest priority would probably be to help the customer come up with a solution that best fits their needs and what they need to have done. So,
Yeah, so I think a lot of customers sometimes might think that when a supervisor comes out, they automatically will rush to a replacement. And that's not always the case.
no,
Sometimes the easiest solution and the best solution is a repair.
yeah.
So when a supervisor is coming out, one of the solutions is a repair. Can you kind of talk a bit about that?
So every time I get called out, regardless of what it is, if it's plumbing or HVAC, I mean, literally anything, I look thoroughly through the system and I will find a solution. And 99% of the time, it's always repairs and or replacement. Because sometimes those repairs they can stack up to a high cost with no warranties, and that's where we get into depth of the replacement conversation. But it's one of those things where I always go in with both because sometimes what best fits is a repair.
How do you guide customers through decisions without making them feel pressured?
So I never pressure anybody to do anything because at the end of the day that's just not the right thing to do. I explain pretty much the age of the age of the equipment, the warranties that are left. That usually there's not at that point. And most of the times it comes with a 1 year warranty if you do an expensive repair. It's a 20-year-old air conditioner. If you put $3,000 into it, but then next summer another component goes bad, that's a big ticket.
Yeah.
So I explain that thoroughly to a customer, and a lot of times I use a lot of basic knowledge of like a car. Let's just say your transmission goes on a 20-year-old car, or it's starting to go. You're looking at replacing the car.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes they want to fix it, which is fine. That's why we always give that option also. But I explain it to that way. Breaking it up pretty much of two different ways, and then I let them make their decision. I give my opinion, but I let them make their decision, whether it's on the spot, the next day, the next week, the next year. It's there.
Yeah,
So,
I think one of the most important parts of our business is we don't have any quotas that we need to make.
nope,
So we never ever want to feel like we're pressuring a customer to make a decision. That's not our business model and it never will be.
nope.
So we really pride ourselves in being a family owned business and being there for the customers any way we can and really helping them through that decision making process, because a lot of the times this decision can be an expensive thing. So
Correct.
in any way that we can, we want to help
Hmm.
guide and never pressure.
Yep, 100%.
Many homeowners naturally want the lowest price when replacing a heating or cooling system. So why isn't the cheapest quote always the best option?
That's a good question. So, not going with the cheapest quote or going with the cheapest quote, sorry, is not always the best way to go about things because a lot of times the cheapest quote, whether it's the cheaper contractor or the cheaper piece of equipment, is sometimes it's lesser value equipment with the warranties are lesser. It's one of those things too. I mean, you run into it a lot anymore. Is you go to a big box store and you can buy a unit off the shelf, but where's the support?
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I'm big into is warranties and support. If a part fails, I want to be able to call the manufacturer and talk to their tech support to get a solution. You go to those big box stores, you get those off the shelf things. Sometimes you call and you never hear back.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest things I always look into. And I mean, you don't have to go with the most expensive, but going with the cheapest sometimes is not the right answer because then a lot of times we're getting called back out to go out and look it over and try to fix it, and a lot of times we can't.
Yeah.
So,
And going with, it doesn't necessarily have to be RJ Groner, but when you're choosing a contractor, you want to make sure that those warranties, those, after hours are available. So
mhm.
let's say your new system, there's a part that goes wrong. Will that contractor come back out on the 4th of July, if your AC breaks down on the 4th of July at midnight, we do.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you find a contractor that fits that price tag.
Yeah. Especially after spending so much money, you want to make sure that, you're backed by anybody and everybody. I mean, I've been out Christmas morning, to a job before.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one of those things you have to make sure that's part of, obviously the plan to do something. So
Yeah. What are some common mistakes homeowners can make when choosing a new HVAC system or contractor?
I mean, just like we said before, going with the cheapest one. It's obviously everybody knows the theory. You got to get three quotes. But that's nice. But you always got to make sure you compare apples to apples,
Mm-hmm.
because we could be offering this with other components that are needed for a proper install when somebody else is just going for just the equipment and that's it.
Yeah.
But then down the road there could be other issues because X, Y, and Z was not replaced like it was recommended by us or even other people. I mean, I've come across quotes where we're apples for apples and it's the same thing, and it's obviously it's up to the homeowner to make that final decision. But that's one of the biggest things. You want to make sure you're getting what's being recommended pretty much.
Yeah.
So
what do you enjoy most about helping customers during what can be often a stressful situation? So you're out there in the field, the technicians called and said, the compressor's bad, there's a leak in the coil. That's a stressful situation. What do you enjoy most about walking customers through that?
So that's definitely a very stressful, and you always know it's stressful no matter what, because instantly that customer's mind's going to, this is going to cost me $20,000 to replace.
And it wasn't planned.
It was not planned. They just replaced the roof. They bought a new car, or they did a remodel. It's one of those things where, it's definitely stressful. But by me coming in and verifying and explaining everything to them, why it happened, and that's where I think I get the most enjoyment, is I can help a customer with repair and or replacing it, or anything we can do for them, or even if it's just a band-aid fix for temporary things. I guess it's the just helping them in general, of coming up with an answer, is probably what I like the most about it.
Yeah. And also walking them through all our financing options, I'm sure is a huge relief for them as well.
Yeah. As soon as someone hears, and financing isn't just for replacement, it's repairs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally down to $50 you can finance.
Yeah.
It's such nice to hear that, because at the end of the day, when you hear $10,000, you want to sit down.
Yeah.
And then,
I need a minute.
Yeah. So when I come up and I say it's going to be $89 a month for X amount of time, you can swallow that pill a lot easier hearing $89 a month over $10,000.
For sure.
So, I mean, we offer a lot of different financing options, so it's always nice when you can have that conversation that it's offered.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
What's one piece of advice you wish every homeowner knew about maintaining their heating and cooling system?
Okay, this is always the biggest questions. I have two things. Filter changes is probably my top. Is filter change 100%. I mean, every house is different. Environments are always different, but filter change is the biggest thing. It's if you don't change your filter, it suffocates the system, which puts strain on the system, which overheats the compressor. It does a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And it's just an air filter. So that's one of my biggest things. The second thing is maintenances.
Yeah.
And I hear it all the time. Well, the guy who put this in told me we don't need to maintenance them. And that is not true. I mean, just like the car analogy, you buy a new car, you
got to do the oil change.
Oil change, always. So I look at it this way. Maybe it doesn't need to be cleaned, but tuned up. Check the electrical components. I mean, capacitors. That's the biggest thing in the summertime. When it's super hot, there's a lot of stress, a capacitor goes bad.
Yeah.
But now doing a maintenance or a tune-up, we can check that capacitor and see that it's weak.
Mm-hmm.
So we catch it before it becomes a bigger problem. Same thing with any other component in the system. We can catch those things. So those are probably the two biggest things that should be done always.
Yeah, that's great advice. And lastly, RJ Groner has been a third-generation family-owned business serving the Poconos since 1929. So that's 97 years.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that family-owned approach shows up in the experience our customers receive every day?
So I truly believe family-owned businesses, even if it's not HVAC, any family-owned business in a community is one of the best things to have, because we truly care.
Yeah.
And friends like the owner of the company, he knows, you go down the street and they're like, oh, I know him. And it's nice to hear those things. And then, they're also present for the company.
Yeah.
So for instance, he's here, he says hello to everybody, good morning, good afternoon, and he comes out and jokes with us. It's one of those things where it's family, and everyone is family. And then, you get into the PEs and stuff like that. You never met the guy. He could have an office across the country. We don't know.
Yeah.
So, having it in the community, as family owned is it's amazing to have, and I mean, there's several of them out there, but I think for us, it's one of the key standpoints that, we care. So, and we're here always. So.
Yeah, and that definitely shows up. I mean, I know you personally, you replace one AC system for a customer, and years later, maybe their water heater goes bad and you're back again because you've built that relationship with them.
Yeah.
And so I think being a family-owned business, we really cherish those relationships with our customer where they keep wanting us back because we keep showing up for them. We're there when they need us the most. And I think that's not something you always get with those PE firms, because we really go the extra mile. We really make sure that we're there.
I mean, weekends and nights. I mean, this week I had a customer call me at 6:00 at night, on weekends. And, it's one of those things where we answer the phone. We're there, we help out, we make phone calls over the weekend to get the customer taken care of, where, bigger companies, like, that's Monday's problem. It's the weekend, but that's one of the big things that I enjoy, especially here. So
thank you, Ryan.
No,
thanks
course.
for being on Behind the Service.